And welcome, everyone, to Masechah Succah. We are on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. We like the Luinish Boch Yehuda, and we are approximately halfway down the page. So the gemorah. One second, let's find where we are. So the gemorah says we're more like 12 lines down from the 12 to the top. Amr of Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Says Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, not Shmuel. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Halacha. What's the din? Halacha. The rule is Sukkah tzricha shtei machzekes reishai v'rubai v'shachanai. You have to be able to fit inside your sukkah, your head, your body, and your table. We explained, Rashi says, that they used to eat those days lying down. So nowadays, Reisha V'rubai v'shachanai would mean you're sitting down. It doesn't mean anything. In those days, they'd lie sideways. So that means approximately 7 tefachim. You lie sideways, it's got to fit 7 tefachim. The Achronim ask, why does it have to be 7 by 7? It could be 7 by 3. You lie on your side, as long as it's big enough for your head, 7 by 3, 7 by 4. Why do you have to have a shulchan in front of your stomach? Like, in other words, the 7 tefachim seems to be your body, your head, and the table on top. Why do you need a table in 2 directions? Okay, kasha. But the Pasha says over here, it doesn't say specifically 7 by 7. That's how all the Achronim understand it. According to this opinion, the Shulchan Aruch Pasuk, you need to have 7 by 7. Again, it doesn't say Beferish, it says Reishav B'Shulchanai. It could be 7 by 4. I don't know. All right. It says the gemorah. That's the thing. You need to have 7 by 7. And the Pasha says halacha Moshe Sinai. You need to have Roisha V'rubai v'shachanai, and therefore it's deoraisa. If you don't have Roisha v'shachanai, you're not yetzer. You got to eat again. Amalei Rav says Rav to Shmuel by Yitzchak. Come on, who are you paskening like? Who says that? Where do you get this from? Beis Shammai. Are you of the opinion that Beis Shammai, we're going to follow Beis Shammai over here? We know from Brachas, which we didn't learn too long ago, that Beis Shammai is Lav Mishnah. It's not even a Mishnah. It's not considered an opinion at all. So why are you pasking like Beis Shammai? Amalei, Elakaman, he said to me, Elakaman, who else is like that? That's the sheet of Beis Shammai. Who else would I be holding like? Yeah, of course it's Beis Shammai. Don't ask me, in other words, like, don't ask me who am I holding. Like, of course it's Beis Shammai. You have a kasha, you say to me, why are you passing like Beis Shammai? But yeah, of course it's Beis Shammai. So Ikud Ba'amri, some learn this whole dialogue happens slightly differently. Amar Rabba, Davar Achmani. So Rabbi said to him, Amar Achmani, who is this? Amalei Beis Shammai, he will like Tozos Menah. He said, who's the author of this opinion? And he said, it's Beis Shammai, and we follow Beis Shammai. Like Tozos Minah, don't move from this opinion. It's Beis Shammai, and leave it alone. That's how we pass him. We pass him like Beis Shammai. There's a big place, it's Beis Shammai, like Tozos Minah. Maybe we'll take a look at some of it. But let's keep going in the meantime. So there's a gemorah. Ask Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Ask Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Now, he has a kasha on Beis Shammai's opinion. On the machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Mind the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, b'such tana pligi. How do I know, in other words, how do I know that the machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is talking about a small sukkah, and what's the size of a small sukkah? What's the minimum size that you can have your sukkah? How do I know that that's the argument between them? In other words, Beis Shammai says you have to have Roisha V'rubai v'shulchanai, your head, your body, and the table. And Beis Hillel just says Roisha V'rubai, you don't need the table, right? Beis Hillel is always makel. Here also Beis Hillel is makel. Beis Hillel says you don't need your table. You can have 6 by 6. You don't need 7 by 7. So ask the gemorah, how do I know that that's the machlokes? Whether a small sukkah could be 6, could be 7, Maybe, sorry, let's read it inside. Maybe the argument is about a big sukkah. And what? He's sitting at the edge of the sukkah, and his table's in the sukkah. In other words, the machlekes Beis Shammai is nothing about what the minimum size of the sukkah is. The question is are you allowed? You have a huge sukkah, you have a huge buffet, hundreds of people in this massive sukkah, but the table is outside the sukkah. You want to be able to squeeze as many people as you can inside the sukkah, so you put the buffet table with all the food outside the sukkah, and people are eating. Well, the table's outside the sukkah, and are we worried that since the table is outside the sukkah, the people inside will follow the table? They'll lean out and they'll eat outside of the sukkah. Maybe that's a machlekes. Nothing to do with how big the sukkah is. The sukkah could be huge. It doesn't matter. If the table is outside, possible. Good morning. So wonderful to see you. Shalom Aleichem. So maybe that is the machlekes. We're on Sukkah Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Here's one I prepared earlier. About 10 lines down from the top. So how do we know that the machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is? I see the resemblance. You definitely related somehow. How do I know that the machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is what the minimum physical size of the sukkah has to be, or is allowed to be? In other words, if it's half a meter by half a meter, it's possible. So Beis Shammai says it has to be 7 by 7. Beis Hillel says it's got to be 6 by 6. Gimel Amud Aleph. Maybe the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is you got a huge sukkah, hundreds of meters big. The question is the table allowed to be outside of the sukkah? So let's read this inside. So back into gemorah. I'm going to come. So Maskef Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. How do I know that the argument is between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is they're arguing about a small sukkah? Maybe the argument is talking about a big sukkah. You're sitting at the edge of the sukkah. Your table's inside the house. So you've got this huge buffet. The sukkahs are size hundreds of meters. You've got hundreds of people in there. But the table with the shmog is outside the sukkah. And we're worried, Beis Shammai is worried that people are going to follow the table or eat over the table, not in the sukkah. Maybe that's the machlekes. The Beis Shammai Savri goes, Beis Shammai says, that's not good. Your table actually physically has to be in the sukkah. Maybe you're going to eat over the table. Beis Hillel said, no, we're not guys. Again, Beis Shammai is machmer. We're worried. The guy's going to eat over outside. Beis Hillel says, no, we're not worried. He can eat in the sukkah. There's no problem. V'dai kanami, I'll bring you proof that is the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, as opposed to what is the minimum legal requirement to have your sukkah. In other words, okay, v'dai kanami, diktani, Misha Roshi b'sukkah, it says in the Brisa, Misha Hayab, whoever was Rosh b'sukkah, you're sitting there with your head, your body inside the sukkah, and your table's in the house. Beis Shammai says it's possible. If you're in the sukkah, but your table's in the house, Beis Shammai says possible. Beis Hillel says it's kosher. Again, we explained why do you need 7 tvachim, which is about a meter for your head and your body? Because you're lying down. In those days, they ain't lying down, so your head and your body is around a meter, right? That covers it. 7 tvachim is a meter. So it says, now listen to this diuk. If the kasha is so, why does the Mishnah go ahead and talk about a guy he ate like this? If he eats lying down with his table inside, it's kosher as possible. What it should say is, if the machlekes is about where the table is, about the size of the sukkah rather, if the machlekes is how big a sukkah is, just say it means machzekas ve'enim mezeches. It should say if the sukkah is machzik reisha v'shachanai kosher. If it's not machzik reisha v'shachanai pasul, it should talk about the size of the sukkah. It should say the size of a sukkah has to be reisha v'shachanai. It doesn't say that. It talks about mishaya. It talks about a guy. A guy sits and eats in a sukkah. If the sukkah holds him, reisha v'shachanai kosher. If it doesn't hold him, it's pasul. Just say if the sukkah is machzik, why do you have to stop talking about a guy? Who cares if there's a guy or not? It's either kosher sukkah or not kosher sukkah, regardless of whether there's someone sitting there eating or not, right? That's the deal. You should just talk about whether the sukkah, what's the size of a sukkah. So ask gemorah, sukkah ktani like pligi. Are you going to tell me that they don't argue about sukkah ktani, about a small sukkah? Of course they argue about a small sukkah. They're not just argue about whether if the table's inside the sukkah, they also have a dispute about a small sukkah. Why? I'll prove to you. You have a price that says, if the sukkah is big enough for Reish V'Shchoneh, it's kasha. And Rebbe Yomer, Rebbe says it's got to be 4 by 4 feet. So you have a machlekes here, Tanakama. We don't know who the Tanakama is. The Tanakama clearly says the sukkah has to be Reish V'Shchoneh, 7 by 7, 7 tvachim. And Rebbe says there's going to be arba amas. Okay, it's a third opinion which you haven't seen till now. Rebbe says the sukkah has to be arba amas. But you see it clearly, we're not talking about a guy that's eating and the table's in the house. Here it's black or white, we're talking about the size of the actual sukkah. What's the minimum size, minimum area? Okay, so here it says Reish V'Shulchan, and then there's another brayso of Tanya Idach. There's a second brayso that says Rebbe Yomer also psula. Again, Rebbe is the same opinion. You need to have 4 amas by 4 amas. But Chacham say it's got to be Roshai V'Rubai, which is Vav 6 by 6. And V'ilu Shulchan like Tani, but in this brayso it doesn't say Shulchan. So you got a contradiction in braysos. One brayso, the first, Rebbe keeps the same opinion. You need 4 amas by 4 amas. But the first opinion, the other opinion, Chachamim, one brayso says Reish V'Shulchan, right? One brayso says Reish V'Rubai. So Kashin Adadi, it's a stira. How do you understand this contradiction? One brayso is Beis Shammai in the Tanakama, and one brayso is Beis Hillel. That's why one says Reish V'Shulchan, right? One says Reish V'Rubai without Shulchan. But for sure, we see from here that the machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is the size of the sukkah. It's not whether, even if you have a huge sukkah, you can have a table inside the house. We're not talking about eating. We're talking about, is the sukkah kosher or not kosher? How big it has to be. So Amud Yomi says Mazutra. So that's a great raya. So for sure, there's a machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel about small sukkah, if it could be vav by vav or zayin by zayin. Amud Yomi. I can also bring a proof from my Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, Beis Shammai paisel, Beis Hillel machshir. It's kosher and it's possible. It's using a notion of it's valid or it's invalid. Vim Isa, if you're going to tell me we're talking about a big sukkah, right? The sukkah is not possible. The sukkah is a great sukkah. If the whole question is this guy ate in a huge sukkah, but the table is in the house, the sukkah is kosher. The sukkah is 100% kosher. The question is, was he yotza or lo yotza? Did he fulfill a mitzvah by eating like this, or did he not fulfill the mitzvah, eating with a table in the house? And it doesn't say, we're not addressing this is maybe the first place in Shas that talks about the difference between the chefts and a gavra. The chefza is the sukkah. The gavra is the man. The Mishnah is talking about clearly it says, it doesn't say yotza lo yotza. It's not referring to the man. It's talking about kosher, not kosher. So it's clearly discussing the sukkah, not the man. If we were talking about the guy, whether he was yotza the mitzvah of eating in the sukkah, I would say yotza, lo yotza. So you see from the Mishnah another raya that we're talking about a small sukkah, whether it's kosher or not kosher, not yotza lo yotza. So ve'ela kasha, we have one kasha, yishahaya. Back to that brisa. It says Mishay Rosh B'Steicha Sukkah B'Shama B'Yis B'Zel Machshirin. It says B'Ferish Mishahaya. It's talking about the guy. So why are they talking about the guy? Right? Why didn't it talk about the size of the sukkah? Talk about a sukkah. Why he says Mishahaya, a guy who's in the sukkah. Just say the sukkah is machzekes, not machzekes. So you've got 3 different brises. One's mashma like this and 2 mashma like that. What do you do? So the gemorah answers, La'ilam Batati Pligi. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue about 2 separate things. Pligi b'sukkah Ketana, they argue about small sukkah. Pligi b'sukkah Gedolah, they're arguing the small sukkah, how big your small sukkah is allowed to be. And they also argue about when you're sitting inside the house, if we're worried you're going to follow the table. And there's something missing over here in the Lashon of the Brayso. And this is really what it says. If his body is in the sukkah and his head's in the sukkah, but the table is in the house, Beis Shammai says you're not yaitza. So here you use the Lashon yaitza. He's not yaitza. You didn't do the mitzvah. Beis Hillel says he is yaitza if the table's in the house. And now it talks about the size of the sukkah. If the sukkah ain't a machzekes, if it's a small sukkah, Beis Shammai paisim, Beis Hillel machshirin. Beis Hillel says, Beis Shammai says it's possible, Beis Hillel says it's kosher, so we end up with 2 machlokes. First machlokes is, if he eats in a big sukkah, a huge sukkah, he's eating inside, but the table's in the house, is he yaitza? And the second machlokes is, what if he eats, if the sukkah itself, the physical sukkah is less than Rosh Hashanah v'Shachanai? What's the size of a kosher sukkah? Now, the gemorah says we passing like Beis Shammai. Well, this is one of the few places in Shas we passing like Beis Shammai, right? Who is it? Rav Shmuel. Omer Rav Shmuel, we passing like Beis Shammai. Rav Shmuel b'Yitzchak, we passing like Beis Shammai. The leitozes mina, it's got to be zayin al zayin, and that's halacha. Zayin al zayin, no one's chaylik. That's halacha. What about the shaila of the table in the house? Are you allowed to have the table in the house or not? We passing like Beis Shammai, that's talking about zayin al zayin. What about you have a huge, this is very practical kasha. You have a lot of guests. You got a big sukkah, and part of it, the table is under a part that's not kosher. Can you have the table under the part that's not kosher? Or are we geyser? Hashem yimashech. And we passing like Beis Shammai. So what's it telling you? What does it depend on? It depends on, are these 2 machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel the same thing? So there's one opinion that both Beis Shammai's gzeras are the same thing. Why does the sukkah have to be a certain size? Why can't you have the table in the house? Why can't you have vav al vav? Why do you need zayin al zayin? Because if it's vav al vav, we're worried that you're going to follow the table. Just like his geyser, even if you have a huge table, you're going to eat outside. If you have a small sukkah, we're worried that you're going to also eat outside. It's the same gzeira. And therefore, if we pass like Beis Shammai with his gzeira, we should pass like him there. That's the opinion of the Rif. That's the same thing. It's the same machlokes. There's no 2 machlokes going over here. Normally, we don't want to say there's 2 machlokes if you don't have to. The Ran has a whole different opinion. The Ran says the reason why vav al vav is not kosher according to Beis Shammai is got nothing to do with maybe you're going to follow the table, maybe you're going to eat outside. That's because it's dira shrucha. A person needs to have I don't know exactly the technical translation of shrucha. It's a stinky house. No one lives in a house, vav al vav. You need at least zayin al zayin. That's the size of a house that you can live in. That's not an apartment. No, you can't live in a vav al vav. You need zayin al zayin. So therefore, you can paskin like Beis, and for that we paskin like Beis Shammai. We paskin like Beis Shammai that you have to have zayin al zayin, not vav al vav. We don't paskin like Beis Shammai with gzeras shemi yimashach hashachanai. No one ever said we follow Beis Shammai with gzeras that you might follow the table. So it turns out it's machlokes Rishonim. Do we paskin like Beis Shammai with shemi yimashach hashachanai? Are you allowed to have the table outside the house? And if yes, how much of the table could be outside the house? I didn't see anyone discussing this. I'm just talking off the cuff here. Sometimes a guy has in Israel, they make a lot of these balconies. Half of it's covered. The guy builds a sukkah. The whole thing looked like it's in the house. The women sit under the covered part. The men sit under the rest of it. So now you're the man, you're sitting on the part that's kosher. You look up, you see the stars, mahadrin. But the rest of the table is covered. Lefi Beis Shammai, I don't know. Maybe you're going to end up leaning over the other part of the table. Maybe it's possible Lefi Beis Shammai. And we pass like Beis Shammai according to the Rif in this Indian. Or is maybe Beis Shammai, I mean Machmer and Beis Shammai, but he for sure be Machmer. The Xera, if you're going to nimshach hashachanai, maybe it's enough. You got like a tefach you can eat off, maybe that's fine. It's interesting kasha. Let's take a look at Taisus. Taisus says, Dama lachmani, Beis Shammai v'loi tozimno. Second Taisus. Beseder of Amram Pasuk b'shishim b'kaimas lachak Beis Shammai. In Rav Amram guy, and he passes in 6 places like Beis Shammai, Chada the Sukkah. One of the places we pass like Beis Shammai is this gemorah over here. Sukkah, Sichtei Machzekas, Roishai, Ruba v'Shechonai. It's got to be 7 on 7. That's one of the places. Idach, B'Menachas, Perkat Cheles, Gabi Sadim, B'Tzitzitz. Another places where you have to put your sheets in your beds, you have to put tzitzis on them. Beis Shammai Patron. Beis Shammai says you don't have to put tzitzis on your sheets when you sleep in. Beis Hillel Chayvin. It'll be an interesting thing if you have to put tzitzis on your sheets. I've never seen anyone doing this. It ain't a mission, right?
I think it's because they used to use it to wrap themselves in the morning when they would wake up in the morning.
That's why Beis Shammai says, that's why Beis Hillel.
They can't make a bracha, right, unless they're covered, so they used to wear it.
Oh yeah?
Right.
Okay. I haven't learned that.
I think that's the concept.
Okay, avoid kamachut, and how many strings you have to have on the tzitzis machlokes if it's going to be 3 or 4. Okay. So skip a couple of lines. Vidim zechus brachos. We saw this one recently. Mechabnis abayis v'achkach noitlis yadayim. Okay. So v'arminim b'gemorah b'kol ha'prik halachah Beis Hillel b'amach. It says in Gemara we always paskin like Beis Hillel except for these cases. Okay. I also b'seif berek gabi mishach al v'shas v'lei berach. The ma'aseh Gemara ugd Rav Chana the Ashkechena. There's another case over there about whether you have to go back to bench. The Gemara says that it's a very unclear Gemara. The Gemara says there it's a machlokes if you have to go back. One guy followed Beis Shammai, he went back and he found a gold dove. The other guy didn't go back and he got killed. So the Gemara says, do like Beis Shammai, he went back and he found the golden dove, whatever that means. So in that case also you should follow Beis Shammai and go back to bench. Okay, so okay, okay, Hillel, the other guy went, he did like Beis Hillel and the lion ate him up. Because that's kasha. How to come to and because pick an achke Beis Hillel, bar mahach. Shemet Yishuv Beis Hillel, nam imoid the l'chtchilim miyavdin Beis Shammai. He says, you know what, maybe the reason why in those cases we pass like Beis Shammai is because even Beis Hillel agrees that you could do like Beis Shammai. So why here do we pass like Beis Shammai? You can't ask that if you did like Beis Shammai, you didn't do anything. And the Gemara that brings a raya from over here, we're going to see that with Reb Chaim and Achronim, that what happened? That he made a sukkah. All the elders went to visit him. Beis Shammai is zikayin, Beis Hillel zikayin. On Motzu, they found him sitting in the sukkah. He sat there with his head and body in the sukkah, but where was his table? In the house. Not like Beis Shammai, right? So the elders of Beis Shammai said to him, if this is the sukkah that you've always been living in, you never will Mekayim mitzvah sukkah. So he told him, if this is your sukkah, that your table's in the house, sorry to tell you, you never will Mekayim mitzvah sukkah. It's like you tell a guy, those your tefillin, it's possible. You never put tefillin on your whole life. You never kept sukkah. Like Yad Mitzvah Koyel Mech, or Maskina Hosel, Gemara says there, the Halacha Kedev Reb Chaim and Achronim. Do we pass like Reb Chaim and Achronim? Da he plucked the Besukah G'dayla. Can Maskina, because Betati pligi. Our maskana is that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue in two cases, Sukkah Gedola and Sukkah Ketana. So, Ubahi halacha Beis Hillel. And by Sukkah Gedola, we passing like Beis Hillel, that it's fine if the table's outside the Sukkah Gedola. Aval halacha b'Sukkah Ketani, but here, by Reb Chaim, it was a small Sukkah, Uba halacha Beis Shammai. And with that, we're passing like Beis Shammai. So Taisus is implying, Taisus is saying that we're passing like Beis Shammai in one and Beis Hillel in the other. When it comes to Sukkah Gedola, we're passing like Beis Hillel. We're not worried. So therefore, we're passing like Reb Chaim. He ate with his. He had a big sukkah, I guess, but his table was in the house. And Beis Shammai says you were never Makayim. The gemorah says we're passing like Reb Chaim. That's not a problem. So how could that be? Because we're passing like Beis Hillel in that case. Table at big sukkah, table at the house is fine. But when it comes to small sukkah, we're passing like Beis Shammai. Miyu, schmeißen das Thema. How could the Gemara say if you did like Beis Shammai, you never did anything? Why? To ride the Maisi Maiske Beis Hillel Mairi. Sorry. They did like Beis Hillel. You don't need to bring a raya. If you did like Beis Shammai, you did nothing. So Tais is basically like, what did you want to bring a raya from the case of Yechna Charani for? What were you trying to prove from that? That if you did that, with the Achronim, it's a little bit complicated. What the Achronim explain is it means like this. Just like we say, if you did like Beis Shammai, you did nothing, you weren't Yitzah. Beis Shammai's Talmidim say the same thing about Beis Shammai. If you did like Beis Hillel, you weren't Yitzah, right? So they told him, if you did like this, you never Mekayim Mitzvah Sukkah Miyamecha. But we hold like Beis Hillel, and therefore it goes the other way. If you follow like Beis Shammai your whole life, you never did anything. The Tzarech Leima. So Taisa says, the Yitzri Chosam Nasui Heicha de Beis Hillel Machmirim Midrabanan. You need to tell me that if you did like Beis Shammai, you did nothing in a case where Beis Hillel is Machmir Midrabanan, Beis Shammai Mukila Adaraisa. In the case where Beis Shammai says it's fine, but Beis Hillel says I'm going to give you a Chumra Darabanan, you're going to follow a certain Chumra Darabanan. This is really all I wanted to get to. Beis Hillel's Machmir, they said, you got to say Kriya Shema sitting down, or you got to, whatever it is, you got to do, right? But with the Raisa, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel agree. But with the Rabbanan, Beis Hillel Machmir, Beis Shammai Mukhi al the Raisa v'loy gozri, you must have given Beis Shammai lo yotze. If you follow the words of Beis Shammai, you're not yotze. You're dechavos. I feel with the Raisa. You're not even yotze with the Raisa, even according to Beis Shammai. Why? According to Beis Shammai, you're yotze. Even though according to Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai mid the Raisa, it's good. It's kosher. Since Beis Hillel said mid the Rabbanan, it's wrong. You're not yotze even with the Raisa. You got nothing. And it's a big shiloh. Might have come in if you're not yet to the rice of the Rabbanon. Who cares if you're not yet to the rice of the Rabbanon? In other words, according to Beis Shammai, you're not yet to the according to Beis Hillel, you're not yet to the Rabbanon, right? Okay, I understand that you're not yet to the Rabbanon. Makes sense. Rabbi said you blew shofar, you did something wrong. You're not yet to. Might have come in if you're not yet to the Rabbanon the rice. And Taisus is saying that if you follow Beis Shammai, you're not even yet to the rice. So nafkamin is going to be whether, according to the Shagas Hare, it's interesting you say it. He says nafkamin is going to be now you've got to blow shofar again, you've got to sit in the sukkah again, but it's alidei derchavera. Do you say now mitzvah saseh is a doichel? Can you go ahead now and blow the shofar and be over in Issa Daraisa? That's you got to be over in Issa Daraisa. We normally have a principle that it's a doichel. But that's only if you weren't Makayim the mitzvah Daraisa. If you're already Makayim the mitzvah Daraisa, you can't do it. So that's going to be the nafkamina, whether you yetzer the rice or the rabbanon. Either way, you should do it again. You went yetzer the rabbanon, right? We do mitzvah the rabbanon. I shake lulav on the second day Yom Tov. Question is if you can do an essay dechalais and say even be'issa not go ahead, shake lulav, and be over and issa the raisa. All right, have a wonderful day, shkach.